We recorded. Welcome everyone back to the Level Set. I'm here with Larry Fields, attorney extraordinaire, and D. Mike Jones to talk about today's issues and current events. I'm going to jump right into our discussion. The thing that's at the top of my mind, there's a couple of things. You've got the January 6th committee about to issue its initial report to the public at large. I've heard rumblings about some of the things that they've found and that it is all much worse and more organized than anyone ever knew. But before we get to that, the Grand Rapids police officer, Officer Christopher Scher, if you recall, I think it was a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago now, shot Patrick Lyoya in the back of the head while he was on the ground, while he was on top. He was kneeling on Patrick's back, shot him in the back of the head, and was charged today, Larry, with second-degree murder. Accountability is a thing. And I've seen that tape, and I believe that both of you have seen that tape. And police accountability should be a thing. It's just the best training that is available to law enforcement across the country. I've said it repeatedly. There is no such thing as training the racism out of an officer. There's no such thing as training the will to excessive force out of an officer. The best training that any of those officers can ever get is to be held accountable for the crimes that they commit. So that has happened today. Here locally, I'm just going to throw some things out. Whatever you all want to jump in on is fine. Here locally, Board of Aldermen President, former Board of Aldermen President Lewis Reed has submitted his resignation. At the time of our last show airing, he had not yet resigned from his position. He has now resigned. I'm sure his attorneys have been in touch with the feds, and I'm sure that the feds have made clear to them that you can do this the hard way or the easy way if you keep pressing it. We may go for the max if you get out of there and accept the realities that have been set forth in front of you. We may look at your prior public service in a better light. I'm not sure that's what happened, Larry. You're an attorney. You may know better than I do. But ultimately, he resigned under public pressure. So there's a lot going on in the legal world. Charges being leveled against folks who are being held accountable for the choices that they make. But that's what we all say we want, and here we are. Larry, what were your thoughts? Let's just jump to Lewis's situation first. I know we talked last week about our disappointment collectively in the leadership in our community, but now he has resigned. What do you think that indicates?
Well, I think it indicates that he understands the writing on the wall. He understands that the road ahead for him is best paved with the reality of jail time at the end of the road. So it's best now to begin some sort of mea culpa and not cost the taxpayers additional monies and to draw the ire of this judge. So that appears to be, on one hand, what it is, or, he could be going full time to fight for his innocence. One of those two things, he said, I don't have time to be, So
his public statement was that he was going to vigorously defend himself. We'll see what that looks like in the face of the audio tapes that were described in the indictment and the other evidence. I wonder if that defense involves some version of the discussion we had last week, where we acknowledge, and it's been written about by people like Ray Hartman, that this is commonplace and that he was not operating outside of the norm, and that somehow, he's going to try to maneuver an argument into a space where I didn't know I was doing anything wrong because this is what everybody does. I don't know, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I'd like to know what Mike would think about that, being a politician and a kingmaker in his own on that, because this is not the first time we've seen the indictments in the political sphere.
And that's, before we go to Mike, that's what's remarkable about it, Larry, is we've seen it all before, which means they've seen it all before and had a better view of it than we had because it was their colleagues in that space that were falling on these kinds of facts. So you should have some level of awareness that, hey man, this pattern right here, this pattern of behavior that I'm engaged in right here is risky. You know, we just saw another indictment out in the county. Tony Weaver, someone I know, was indicted for a version of pay to play relative to COVID funds that were going to be made available. Apparently, in terms of what's in the indictment, approached some businesses about a way to acquire some of those monies dishonestly. Who knows? We'll see what the facts are when those cases go to trial. But again, he was allegedly heard on tape saying, hey, man, I hope they're not recording us because this is how Steve Stenger went down, the former county executive. To my point, everybody knows this is how things go wrong. So when you engage in that, Mike, what possesses these brothers, man, to risk it on such a low ball item, man? You know, 2,500 here, 3,000 there. At age 59 for Louis Reed, facing, you know, 15, a possible 15 years. And according to Gerald Christmas, this is the judge that might give it to you. What happens in the minds, man?
I never understand it, only for this, and I'm not talking, and I'm not gonna make ethical or moral judgments, but I do make a judgment about your judgment and your intelligence. So if you just do risk reward analysis, then, and you only get one time to be wrong, given what you're looking at if you get caught and what you get if you don't, is disproportionately way too much on the risk side and not enough on the reward side. So I would do that. You take a pass, not because you're honest. You take a pass because it ain't worth it. I mean, if you just did it by the numbers, we wouldn't even have to get into the morality of it. And generally speaking, I don't know, and I think if you think like a professional criminal, you always presume that you can get caught, and then the question is it worth it? And the people that always get caught in stuff like this are people that presume you can get away with everything, and even if you got away with it once or you got away with it a lot, you can always get away with it. And the way to think about it is, we can get caught, probably get caught sooner or later. And the question is, was it worth it?
Right.
And if you just process it like that, presuming with a reasonable amount of intelligence, you'll come to a decision that represents your best interest. I mean, that literally has to do with the ultimate morality. Right. But if you just say 18 months, God forbid, 15 months, and you were mentioning Stenger early, I think what's really problematic for these four is how much time Stenger got as county executive.
Right.
And you got to figure that's the baseline for everybody. And it can potentially go up from there.
Well, I can't remember exactly what his sentence was. I know it was significant, though.
It was about like 18, 20 months, which is a long time.
Yeah.
For the feds for a charge like that. And the other thing that's problematic, I would think, when it comes to sentencing, is you got caught in this after Stenger went to jail.
Right.
He got nearly 4 years.
you didn't even take him as a shot across the bow, which means whatever I was doing,
Yeah, let's cut it out.
maybe I think about shutting it down.
Yeah. Yeah, and to a point I heard made earlier, I think Gerald referenced it on the last show, that in the indictment there's an unnamed fourth elected official who's yet to be named, who also apparently was engaged in similar conduct. Who knows how many people ultimately, because the way the feds operate, they don't show their hand until it's time to show their hand. Who knows how many other current investigations are currently running or about to conclude, and how many other people would be caught up in this web. And it remains to be seen how effective the board is going to remain.
Really, here's what you can say for sure. The feds know, and everybody who caught up know.
Yeah, or has a hunch, right? If you're dealing with this guy or dealing with that guy, yeah, man. So we'll see how it goes. Again, man, the leadership crisis has been real in this region. And if we don't develop some forum team, or the other end of the court analogy that we went with last week, describing how young developing players could always go down to that other end of the court where the better older players were and be developed as players, then it doesn't fare well for the region.
Well, here's what I think is the macro problem, or a macro consideration, and that is, do we have the numbers now? Okay, if you and Larry were born what years?
64,
65, and 64.
64.
Yeah.
Well, St. Louis was still a city of 700,000 people. The St. Louis city and county combined had a population of about 1.5 million people. I was born in 1949. The city had a population of 800,000 and change.
Mm-hmm.
So St. Louis was the 8th largest city in 1950. It was still in the top 15 when you guys were born. And now, relative to the size of the country, St. Louis is 65th. I guess the St. Louis city and county, our core metropolitan area, is someplace down in the 30s, maybe low 40s. So the question is, do we actually have the human capital to get where we need to be? And I'll put something on the table that I think the Black community will have to seriously contemplate. And part of the reason you might want to do government consolidation is you just ain't got enough talent to keep this many disparate entities going. I mean, the question is, do you have the human capital for this much diversity in operations? And if you consolidate it, you need fewer people, but you got a chance to consolidate the talent to a more focused that might get you to the next level or give you a chance.
Yeah. We see a version of that with the Board of Aldermen eliminating, 12 aldermanic wards?
28 to 14.
Yeah, well, okay, don't make me do math. Not quite 12, but almost half the wards are going to be eliminated in an attempt to reflect the population decline and, I guess, streamline processes over at City Hall. But you're saying writ large that the same thing may yet need to be duplicated for the region for the same reasons.
Well, I'll put it like this, and that's just, we'll take a sports analogy, and let's just say talent is layered, that everybody's not Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Everybody's not top talent. And so the question is, how many first team players do you need for a 28 person Board of Aldermen to function? And if you had a 14-person board of aldermen, you don't need as many. I mean, it's scale.
Right.
And the same way, if you got a multiplicity of municipal governments in the county or multiple police departments, so how many people are actually qualified to not only be policemen but be chiefs and commanders and stuff? And so when you take all of these disparate places and give everybody these same functions, at some point you're going to run out of competent people to actually do it, because this is not a growing region, this is a shrinking region.
Right. It's interesting, man, as we get ready to transition away from that conversation. I see the Board of Aldermen now, and I see different people commenting and weighing in from the board about this current situation, and I don't recognize most of them. I don't even know who they are, with the exception of a few that I could name. I don't even know who they are. So that doesn't necessarily reflect on them, but it certainly means that, you know, your point is well made. Yeah. And the thing that I want to close out that conversation with that really strikes me, man, is the age of these brothers. Tony Weaver is older than Lewis Reed. And so for him to be in a situation where he's facing what looks like could be, you know, significant time behind, again, something that didn't quite add up in terms of risk reward, it really ratchets it up a notch in terms of how bad of an outcome he's facing, man. This John Collins Muhammad is a young man with an opportunity to recover in many respects. These other brothers, man, it's late in the game to be confined anywhere for any reason.
Oh yeah, jail's a young man's game for sure. It's certainly not an old man's game. I read something about 2 months ago that said over the age of 50, your chances of dying in the penitentiary triple. I mean, from violence. So, I mean, it's clearly not an old man's game. But the thing that I think we need to tie in with this issue is the stagnant way our communities have operated in this culture. We have not seen the sort of growth. Now, in the indictment, if the indictment is true and if the wiretap is true, Muhammad told witness one, or confidential informant one, that this was his job. He was supposed to be helping small businesses. You're right. Why are you doing it like this? And in the indictment, he got jammed up. And when he got jammed up, he went and got Lewis to get unstuck. So, I mean, you have what appears to be a culture of this impropriety, and we are suffering from it. So, yeah, I had my woe is them moment, but at the same time, we need to have a serious look at how we hold folks accountable. You're an enemy to our community based off of what you're doing. There is absolutely no reason why there shouldn't have been a burgeoning black middle class with these individuals that were in control. But we continue to operate from a position of weakness. Now, here you are, in order for a black person to do business with the city, when we have all 3 people on the apportions board were black, we have to go out and fill some certification out. This is backwards. And it's backwards because these guys apparently have vision for their own self-interest. And we need to hold them accountable for that. If it is true, they deserve every second in jail. Because what you have done, just like I tell individuals in these discrimination cases, when you discriminate against an employee, you are harming 3 generations. You harm the actual employee, particularly if the employee has children that are teenagers, because if you fail to promote, you fail to hire, you illegally fire and discriminate against that, and cause emotional distress, that parent takes all of that trauma home. That child now has to get student loans if they go to college. That child that gets student loans is not going to be able to buy a home within the next 10 years or 15 years, because they have to pay those student loans off to have their ratios correct. And that child's children will suffer from inadequate housing, inadequate schooling, and so forth. We cannot let these guys get off the hook like that either. They did the exact same thing as racist individuals that discriminate against employees in our community. And they've got to pay for that.
And to a point Mike made last week, we also as a community have to develop the ability to move on. You know, some losses are write-offs or the cost of doing business as a community. You know, what do you say, Mike? We lament our falling for too long before we get back out on the floor and start the game again.
Right, because although there was something, I think Larry said that I wanted to respond to, but could have been you. And my mother once said something to me when I told her something stupid. She said, "I'm too old a cat to be fooled by a kitten." and I don't know how, if you 60, you end up in a trick bag with a 30-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That fundamentally, the way I came up, that just can't happen. You know, that's like somebody saying they hang out with their son. Okay, I don't know how you do that.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree, man. And we'll see how it all unfolds in the coming months and weeks. We'll see. I'm sure we'll have a space to evaluate what follows, not just for them individually, but for the region and for city government in particular. This evening, the January 6th committee is making its first public presentation of their findings as they've investigated what happened on January 6th. I don't know how complete that investigation is because I'm fully aware that many of the subpoenas that they issued were ignored, completely by people that they had deemed important enough to the investigation to be questioned. Well, they didn't get the information from those individuals that they were looking for, but apparently, based on what's been leaked, based on public statements of committee members, this was an organized conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States that goes far and wide and deep, up to and including kill lists, provincial government setup. The whole process was clear to the main folks involved, which apparently involves, some elected officials as well, up to and including the former President Donald Trump. I don't know what to expect from this committee. It will be interesting to watch. I certainly don't expect real accountability at any point. I have zero faith in Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, at this point, doing anything meaningful in terms of holding somebody's ass responsible for this at the highest levels. I don't think that he is that AG, but I would like to get your all's thoughts on what you may expect going forward, not only based on what's going to be presented to the American public, because I don't think it's going to sway anybody on the right, period. If they had videotape of these people murdering police officers at the Capitol, it still wouldn't sway anybody on the right. Fox News is not airing it. America One Network is not airing it. All the right-wing outlets are refusing to allow for facts to be presented to their base. Mainstream media, of course, presents quote unquote both sides, which only enables misinformation and disinformation to be disseminated to a broader audience than it otherwise would be. But what are your all's thoughts, man, about what we may expect and see from something like this evening?
I think this is really not about accountability. It's really much more about the politics and the theater of politics in this moment. The question is, can they tell a story? And they got a actual TV producer to help them put this on. This is about telling a story that tries to penetrate enough of white America, okay, because that's where this problem rests, to make them understand the danger that they're in with the other part of white America. That's number one. And if they can, they have a chance to influence how people end up dealing with the elections in November and in 2024. So I think that's number one. Secondly, if they tell the story well enough and it does the first thing, it may create the circumstances that forces Maryland Garland into some proactive action to ratchet up who they're charging and charging at the highest level to uh, to create consequences. Because you do realize that the French have actually locked up a former president, and Bibi Netanyahu in Israel
is indicted. Yeah.
Indicted on the trial. So countries do lock up presidents without coups, and they lock them up in democracies for violating the law. So the real question is not can they move the majority of white people, and nobody locked in on the right, but can they penetrate enough through the fall to get people's enough attention? That's just a question about how well they can tell the story, because basically this America, for me, America has been in this place for a long time, but it's exactly where Weimar Germany was in the 1930s. You got a committed, obnoxious, and I would say evil cohort of the majority population, the majority ethnic group, and they are trying to create a situation that solidifies their hold on the society and the culture going forward. Because the way the culture is evolving, the society is evolving, they are diminishing, their power,
right, right,
by the day, and demographics will tell the. If you just let the demographics play out, this is a completely different different country. So I think this is about this is about the theater of the moment, and it can create a narrative that moves enough people into a different place. And you kind of know that over time, one, how good, what you think of tonight and the performances going forward, and then what kind of impact they have. And lastly, American media is going to have to pick a side, because when you do whataboutism in both sides, that means you with the evil folks.
Right. So, exactly right. Yeah. I agree.
Actually be on this. So real question is, does the corporate ownership of American media think that they and Rupert Murdoch had the same interests, or do they want to maintain the fiction of a liberal democracy?
And Mike, on that question, let me say something to you, because that's a critical question you just posed. And my answer to that is, it looks like it. It looks like it. They think that their interests align, because they're too smart not to know what the impact of both sides and the shit that we've seen is going to be. And they continue to do it consistently. They continue to equivocate and ignore serious attacks on democracy or representative democracy, the idea of it. So where you land is, either we're moving towards an authoritarian state where power is centralized in the hands of a few maniacs and folks who want to see seize control, or a representative democracy of a nation that, as you pointed out, is changing rapidly as we speak, and in 30, 40 years will be a majority brown country. But yeah, I think they are complicit, man. Complicit. I think the mainstream media at this point, in many respects, is complicit in this ongoing, slow-moving, continuing process to restructure governance in this country.
I don't I don't disagree with you.
Yeah. Dr. Charles Alexander, we got word that we have you with us from Chicago, Illinois. Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How you doing, man?
I am well, gentlemen. How are you?
All right. It's good to have you with us, man.
Great to hear your voice.
Glad to be back.
Little hiatus on a world tour, signing autographs all over the globe, man. I'm glad you got back with us.
Hey, I had to take care of the family, brother. I had to take care of the family.
Yeah, man. We've just been talking a little bit about some things here in the region and now expanding out to what's happening nationally. I don't know if you heard that part of the discussion. I think Mike made a critical point. I would say in all of it, and it's interesting that the committee has hired a television producer, but I would say in all of it right now, the media, mainstream media, as far as it impacts white viewership, is playing an outsized role in advancing the worst of what we've seen by equivocating, by both sides in things, by diminishing some of the atrocities, the atrocious level of crime that's been committed over time. And that's going all the way back to when Trump was still in the White House. They were so much more interested in viewers and clicks and advertisers and really sustaining the status quo than pushing the truth out to as many people as they could, that this is where we are now.
I think it's kind of hard to tell what we're going to see. I kind of vacillate from day to day. I could see a scenario where this can work for garnering some energy, amongst us. There's X number of us who we're not going to read the newspaper. We're not going to read. Whatever it is to read, we're not going to read. We're not going to do a lot of independent research. And so this might be that thing because it's coming over, it's going to be on TV, so I imagine that it will always also be live streamed, that, it will capture some folks that, we may not have been able to capture otherwise, because what we need is for people to understand the gravity of the moment. Mike was speaking of Nazi Germany, or at least pre-Nazi Germany, or what have you. I call these folks the Confederacy. And, they the same people, whether they the Nazis or the Confederacy, same thing. And I don't trust that we understand the urgency of the moment.
Mm.
And
Larry, go ahead.
This, TV might help some people to better understand, the urgency of the moment.
And again, what's significant in that space, though, TV would help to understand, which is why Fox News, America One Network, Newsmax, all of these right-wing, and Fox
have decided really not to cover it.
Not even covered in Fox. Really, you can't really call that.
They're not going to cover it on their major network, but they're like Fox. I think Fox is going to cover it on Fox Business. So whatever their secondary channel is, they're going to cover it there. They're not going to cover it on their main channel. But
I think that's representative of the fact that Fox is not really a news station anymore. It's really an arm of it's the media arm of the Republican Party.
It is the extension, yes.
Yeah, it's just an extension of it.
Agreed.
You can't call yourself a journalistic enterprise if you're not covering something like that in America while it's happening.
I mean, Larry, it operates like local TV stations in the Confederacy during what we call the modern civil rights movement. Those stations in Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana, they weren't piping in a lot of national news and things of that nature. They were banning anything that ran the slightest risk of inciting their good Negroes.
Right.
And so Fox is taking that same approach. They're not going to do anything that's going to run counter to the narrative that they give to the Confederacy minions. Yeah. And so we shouldn't be surprised by that.
Larry, did you have any thoughts on on that issue?
I do, but it's nothing new. I mean, you all have just about handled that subject as best as anyone can. The bottom line is that it is theater, and the Democrats traditionally have been out-messaged. So, I mean, it's almost a playback. I think in our lifetime, Clinton was the first one to use producers in Hollywood to get a message out better than the Republicans traditionally had, particularly after Republicans were being led by a Hollywood actor at the time. So, yeah, that is the issue. And the thing that needs to be underscored, like Dr. Alexander stated, is the seriousness of the moment. I think that a lot of that is being lost. And folks do not understand just how close we are to even losing the pretense of a democracy.
Right.
When you have a intentional effort for individuals to be put in place to overturn elections that do not come out the way that a certain populace wants. I mean, we're in a banana republic.
Right.
And we fail to recognize that. And people are, we have enough, people are complaining about the gas prices as they rightfully should be. But this notion, and, to many, this already is a banana republic. I mean, it reminds me right now, it's akin to the hypocrisy of the Professional Golfing Association, because there is a competing interest in golf for professional golfers that are American and, play on that tour that's being sponsored by the Saudis. And their major vocal dissent is that the Saudis killed a journalist. And, they're not nice people. I'm like, excuse me? Is that, it's almost like, is that you talking, America?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you talking? Because, and they can make that statement because they understand how gullible and dumb the American general population is. And so the rest of the world is laughing because the journalists have already done a job here. So here you are, and it hadn't even been 2 months that the Israelis killed a person that had full body armor on, that stated that she was a journalist, killed her, but that wasn't enough. They had to go and be gangsters, and like true gangsters at her funeral, rough people up that were carrying her body to her grave. America has said nothing. And I'm not going to get into our prison population. I'm not going to get into the killing that we're going to probably talk about later that just happened in Michigan, where a police officer kills a black man dead. The drowning, they allowed we were told his brother, you jump in that water. They were pursuing the brother. You jump in that water, we're not going to jump in there and save you, and watch them drown. This goes on a daily basis here.
Mm-hmm.
And the media is the arm that is the enabler. So this is all the status quo. Wynton Marsalis, a couple of I think it was in 2021, had dropped a beautiful soundtrack called "The Funky Get Down," Funky Lowdown, and it talks about how important it is to have two people in the game, baby. So this isn't new. They are all culpable, and there is no liberal media. They're all the same. And they're going to all shed the same light, and because the focal point is the same. MSNBC is as much responsible for Donald Trump being in office as Fox is.
Oh, no doubt. And CNN too.
Oh, no question. They gave that man free time. There have been black candidates for high-profile races this year that we never saw on national media.
Man,
In Kentucky, there was a black candidate that we never saw once on national media.
To your point, Larry, CNN, back when Trump was president with his crazy ass, CNN would have a camera on the podium in anticipation of him maybe coming out. They would leave a camera live on the podium for 5 minutes, empty space, and just talk over it with the commentators in the background. That's what kind of coverage they were giving to that individual. So yeah, man. But you referenced something, man, and I want to jump to that conversation because it was pointed out to me that since George Floyd's murder, police violence has increased. The lack of accountability still writ large, in spite of high-profile cases where, to a point that Dr. Alexander has made on other shows, shouldn't require that I have to have videotape, blow for blow, minute for minute evidence of how you murdered me, as we do in the instance of George Floyd, and as we do with Patrick Lyoya in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where the officer's kneeling in his back and takes out his gun and shoots him in the back of the head. Now we've got second-degree murder charges. I'm surprised it took this long for those charges to be issued. But that is the kind of thing that is at stake, because I would think that we could expect to see more accountability in a quote-unquote representative democracy, where more and more people who understand the lived experience of people who've been abused at the hands of the police come into positions to hold them responsible and accountable. One of the things, let me just put this out here, man, because, you know, it's heavy on my mind, man, heavy. When I say heavy, heavy on my mind. One of the things that's at stake here in this region, as this whole thing unfolds over the Board of Aldermen, is the budget. In the budget this year, so far in the budget this year, is significant monies allocated to the creation of an independent investigative unit at the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office, which would exclusively focus on abused police power and serious incidents involving death at the hands of police here in St. Louis. I think both currently and retroactively taking a look at prior cases to make sure that, you know, things were handled well. So, you know, needless to say, man, that's top of mind for me, but it's the kind of thing that's at stake when we look at situations like what we see unfolding in Grand Rapids and what we've seen unfold all over the country, which you just referenced with those officers watching the man drown. And that same department, literally that same department, had received public commendation and media coverage because they had rescued a puppy from a lake about 3 weeks prior that was in distress out in the water. They went and got the dog.
Well, it was
Let the
humans
brother
involved
drown.
with the puppy.
Yeah,
There were no humans involved, as Dr. Carr reminds us all the time. There's no humans involved when there are
Yeah.
people with melanin.
yeah. So we'll see how it unfolds, man. I don't know if the jury's been selected. You know, we'll see the usual suspects, the police unions coming in to say that, hey, man, we can't do our jobs anymore. If we can't shoot people in the back of the head while we kneel on their backs, then we're not going to do any work at all. The regular bullshit that they assert that in the mainstream is somehow normalized and not challenged. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, man. And
Really,
yeah,
yeah. And I'm gonna hang a curveball for Charles to hit it to the upper deck. But I think we're always operating from the wrong assumption.
mm-hmm.
We're always either surprised, shocked, taken back by all of this nefarious right-wing pushback. But if you stop to consider that independent of the military engagement, the South actually won the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but after 1877, the entire American political culture, social culture, was basically foundationally rested in a theory of racial segregation of white supremacy throughout the country. Looked a little different in the North than it did in the South. But if you take it as an aggregate, America couldn't have been more racist, more segregated if the South had won the Civil War.
Right.
So if as Black folks, if we just presume that we're living in the country where the South won the Civil War, because that's actually what happened for us. And
Mhm.
what we are experiencing is exactly what the country experienced in doing Reconstruction, and that segment of white America attempting to reimpose that social, cultural, political structure back on the country, but they don't have the numbers now. And the real question is going to be how that plays out. And the reality is, and you see what's happening relative to women and other marginalized communities, is they can now not oppress us without oppressing everybody else. Part of the
Mhm.
reason we could bear the brunt of it is the country was 85% white, 10, 12% black, 3% other for about 100 years. And
Mhm.
over years, these numbers have changed dramatically. So in order for them to have that kind of racial hegemony, they have to really clamp down on everybody else. So the real question is how much oppression are white people willing to absorb in order to maintain white privilege?
Mm. That's a great question, man. And there's an interesting nuance to what you just said. And I saw something about a week ago, man, about Hispanic Latinos, which is the largest minority in the country right now. But the number of them who now gravitate toward the Republican Party and that white supremacy shit, man. And there's a concerted effort, additionally, to try to pull some African American men, from what I understand, into the Trump camp. Steve Bannon, one of his consigliere, likes to talk about how we going after them next. They're gonna be rolling with us before you know it. And you can always find that percentage of sellouts, man, that just want to roll with a team that's really out to do great harm to your people.
10% of black
I
men voted. 10% of black men voted for Trump in the
yeah,
last election.
and they're
So
trying to double those numbers, man. And I just
yeah,
wonder
so
what
I
the
mean
hell is going on.
that's and the thing is that Hispanic men and black men want to be associated with what they think is strength. And and are a winner. These are folks that jump on what they think is a bandwagon. I have seen folks argue to the death with black male Trump supporters. I wouldn't engage in you. I argue for a living, so I don't
Yeah,
argue. I
I
don't
really
argue
don't
with
have a whole
people
lot
like
of
that.
time for that.
Yeah, but I've seen
Yeah,
Trump
man.
supporters argue to the black male guys, and you've got these clergy that as Bill Withers would call them, crooked delegations that were trying to raise donations and that supported them. So I mean, we just have to be prepared to fight that because there's a lot
Yeah.
at stake.
But I think Mike is right. I think the numbers favor us. But man, to your analogy, golden analogy, Mike, the players, man, we got the numbers, but do you have the players? The Democrats had some of the numbers they needed if they had the players. Yeah, the Republicans can block some things. Yeah, Manchin and Sinema can block some things, but Biden could be pressured, motivated, convinced to do some things through executive order. Cancel all student debt. That's an executive order he could issue today. But damn it, when did the Democrats find the will to stop letting the Republicans kick them in the ass on the regular basis? It's remarkable to watch, man. I don't know how they remain comfortable with that dynamic.
But do we really have the numbers? I mean, we say we have the numbers, but when you make this thing about white supremacy, we've seen that will ignite and energize folks who heretofore had not been voting. And so if they vote what they perceive to be their interest, even though for the overwhelming majority, it obviously is not. I mean, what do we have to combat that?
Well, It depends on what the numbers are. If we're going with a quote unquote representative democracy and looking strictly at demographics without making any party assumptions, this is going to be a majority brown country in another 30 years, maybe
20.
20 years, maybe. There has
And
been,
I get that part.
there have been enough. I think there's enough empirical evidence that a significant number of that new majority is either left or center. You got a solid core group of right-leaning white folks that's just going to be that forevermore. The Confederacy is going to always be the Confederacy.
Right. The Confederacy is going to vote the Confederacy. Correct.
I don't know that they can outvote a coalition. If you can take a slice of white folks out of that and put them in the camp to protect their own interests, which could be trampled by an authoritarian run by the elites, they need to be convinced, as Mike said at the top of the show, what's at stake for you needs to be shown.
That's my point. Is I mean, I don't. So we say, you know, we say all the time about young folks right now, you know, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. You don't think that these Confederates right now aren't the wildest dreams of the Confederates
think they're
before?
wildest dreams. Right. That's a good point.
I think we may be misspeaking for the ancestors, okay? I'm not sure, but I wouldn't project where we are now based as this is their wildest dreams, the best hope for us. I would like
it's all
think,
kind of ways to read that, ain't it, Mike Jones? It's all kind of ways to read that. And so, I mean, I understand what the numbers say in terms of what the numerical majority is going to be, but at the end of the day, that 3/5 clause that people continue to misinterpret and tell I am more than 3/5 of a man, ain't got jack to do with that.
Not a thing. That is the most misinterpreted clause in the whole.
Yes, that clause is the reason why Biden can't do nothing with Joe Manchin.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, so until we move that, I don't know that I don't know to what degree it matters. And so, you know, now ultimately, I mean, I get that if all of the, you know, if we can maximize all of our numbers, certainly we can make some things happen, but I'm not confident that we can maximize all of our numbers. I'm just
we don't have that track record recently. And to your point, the challenge that's going to need to be overcome is what is being solidified as we speak by that narrow 35% Confederacy. They are locking in election deciders and everything else, man. Voter suppression is running rampant. Gerrymander. Ron DeSantis down in Florida, a key state in presidential elections, just blew up a black district, just unconstitutionally. I'm the governor. Get rid of that district, split it up such that it now represents an advantage for Republicans. The very district that was a majority black, left-leaning Democratic district, he just rewrote it out of existence. With that kind of behavior taking place across the country, you're right. The numbers may not necessarily reflect actual political leverage and power.
We need to stop calling this one country anyway. There's 50 countries. And, you know, particularly in these southern states. These individuals, I mean, you know,
DeSantis is surely operating that way. He surely is operating as if he's got a kingdom down
there.
And
Louisiana and South Carolina, they all did the same thing.
Yes, and so like, so first of all, you know, so you're talking about black men, you know, voting Republican. We need Negroes to stop watching SEC football. That is the Confederacy. And so we are supercharging everything they do just on some leisurely activity because we are overindulged in ACC and SEC and anything else that is Southern sports that just accrues to those state governments. That's just the facts.
Yeah.
The highest paid official in every one of those states is the football coach of the flagship institution.
Mm-hmm.
All the boosters rally around all of that. And you can
Well,
find Negroes on any given Saturday talking about roll tide. That is so ignorant.
hey, but we've seen recently, again, another topic we've covered on this terrific show, the beginnings, I would say, of HBCUs all over the country, not just
We
in the
got to
South,
fight that fight. Absolutely.
starting to recruit our better players, and our better players are responding to that, which is a trend that we hope to see continue.
We got to fight that fight because those resources go to fuel their political machine. We act like it don't, but that's what they do. All of that. So when people was talking about all that money that allegedly Dude gave to the black colleges, that money was already earmarked. He didn't create no new money. Plus, all them other colleges got that money too. So they was talking about like all of the money that was given in Alabama, for example. University of Alabama got $50 million. So it don't really matter how much money.
Now, where did that money
Comparatively,
come
it
from?
doesn't matter how much money that Alabama State or Alabama A&M got, because they was already behind, and then you gave University of Alabama another $50 million, so
which they didn't
you
need.
didn't close no gap.
Yeah, which they didn't need.
Right.
Yeah. And it's ironic, man, because I know that those teams are often presented, sometimes as, hey, we can't be racist. Look at our football team. We can't be racist. Look at that. But then you get somebody like a Jack Del Rio, the defensive coordinator up here for the Washington football team. I forget what their name of their team is now.
They're the Commanders now.
Saying some dumb shit about, they talk about what happened on January 6th. That was a little scuffle, a little, disturbance at the White House. Or they don't talk about all the property.
He termed it a dust up.
A dust up.
But
Jack Del Rio, that's the most ignorant ass statement you could have made with that ignorant ass comment, Jack.
Wait a minute, but that's not our problem.
It's not. I'm just observing it.
Wait a minute. Our problem is the brother that's the defensive tackle. They said it don't matter what he said. What he needs is a defensive coordinator that shows up every day and give.
Yes,
I didn't hear
absolutely.
that part. Who said this?
That is our problem.
Huh?
I'm agreeing with you, Mike Jones.
I didn't know. I was not aware of that. Who said that?
If you read the whole story in the Washington Post, he's in they're starting defensive tackle. That was his comment. So that's our problem. Jack Del Rio is who Jack Del Rio is. Our problem is who we have become.
Man, I was not aware of that.
Wait a minute. We don't need the head of the NAACP calling for his resignation. All we need is the defensive units telling the black players on the Washington Redskins defense say he can't be the coordinator no more.
I'm not gonna line up.
And he be gone in the morning.
Yeah. Do they know that though?
Yeah, they know that.
Yeah, wait a minute.
But do we need to talk about?
Hold it. Wait a minute. Yeah, they know it. And even if they're 200, 300-pound football players, that's some bitch ass shit. Okay, that's exactly what that is.
Mm-hmm.
They ought to be insulted that their white boy has the audacity to say that. Say, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it quite like that, and they okay with that.
Mm.
If didn't nobody say, so what does that say about everybody black? If Charles wants to say just about the SEC, we ought to quit watching the NFL.
We're watching the NFL. Yeah.
Well, black football players could have. Colin Kaepernick could have had a job in quarterback in the NFL team the week after they released him. if black football players say we ain't coming back to work till the brother get a job.
And Mike Jones, that was part of my problem. It was that all these Negroes was talking about, I ain't watching the NFL no more, and they started, and all they was saying was Roll Tide. It was like, so okay, punish it all.
Well,
Punish it all.
and-
It all got to get punished.
and Charles, to that point, I can't get overwrought about racist white people being racist.
No,
Our problem is how we respond to that now.
absolutely.
Okay, we wait a minute. What is it in Pogo? We have seen the enemy, and the enemy is us.
And that's going way back, man. You got to be old enough to know that comic strip. It used to be in the Post Dispatch, in the funnies they used to call them.
Right.
Yeah, man.
But
Larry, I know. Go ahead.
But we are our problem, man. America has been what America has been to us ever since we've been here. What has changed is how we respond to that now.
How we perceive it, and we leave our fate to, who we perceive to be these well-wishing white folks. Now, whether or not they exist, I'm not necessarily arguing. My point is that how many times we gonna keep falling for that? And it's like, they ain't gonna do that. What you mean they ain't gonna do that? They do it all the time.
Charles, who we are is white America is Lucy, we Charlie Brown.
Oh,
with the football.
With
I
the
miss that
football.
football every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
But not this time. I promise I'm not gonna move it. I'm not gonna pull it away this time. Yeah.
This is the thing. And it's like, we gotta be paying attention at some point to what is happening, what it looks like. At some point, stuff gotta feel familiar. You be like, oh, I kind of recognize this. And then you do something different. You just can't do what you did last time. So here we got these folks huddling around, about to repeal, Roe v. Wade, right? They were steady asking that white woman, well, if you can repeal Roe v. Wade, are there other things in play? And they asked her about Brown. And they asked some of them other people about Brown. They said, well, I don't have no comment on that. Okay, so you repeal Roe v. Wade, right? The Voting Rights Act has already been gutted. The remainder of it is under attack. So if you knock that out, then it's got to be reasonable that the 15th can go, right? And in between all of that, you can just strip Brown. And now we right back where we started to, because that's what Make America Great Again means. This ain't just some random slogan that this crazy man says. This is the Confederacy.
Wait a minute. Great is a placeholder for white.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep acting like it ain't.
Right.
This ain't Saturday Night Live. This ain't that dude mocking him. This is real time.
Mm-hmm.
And we struggle with that. And we think, well, no, they ain't gonna let that happen. They who?
Right. And I don't, I need to broaden my circles, man, because most of the people I know they understand, not surprised, to Mike's point, not surprised, not shocked, not anything, only prepared to try to find whatever strategy is available to address the very real issues that you all are laying out that are going to affect us in this lifetime and the folks that we leave to fight the same battles we fight right now. Larry, I know you gave us a solid hour, man. I think we may be at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at that point. And the points that you all made need to sink in, because they're not going to stop at the 15th. They're not going to stop at Roe v. Wade. they're not going to. This country's not going to stop till it gets back to chattel slavery.
And that's the way we need to frame the question for us. Okay? It don't make any difference how anybody else feels about that. That's how we should be feeling about it. And the fact that we position our politics and our political stances to make white America comfortable with our protests is to our detriment. The one thing, whether you were for nonviolence or not, the one thing Dr. King did in his movement was the emotional comfort of white people, of white America, was not his objective. Okay, and that's why now they have co-opted him. But in April of 1968, they hated his guts when he left here, and he wasn't that popular with us too, by the way.
And the folks that he left here have co-opted it.
Right.
Speak on it.
If in fact you want to go back and find out what King was, you got to go and read King. Where do we go from here? Because these folks have never had an original thought in their mind. They turned his entire civil rights, and he told Andrew Young, I don't want to hear from you. You're a capitalist. This is not about capitalism on some of these issues. And the descendants of that movement, man, have continuously either failed to have the intellectual compartments to further that, or they've had other interests. And so, and that's what this monster does. We talked about media earlier, but that's what this monster does. It fashions that, and it makes it palatable for us to maintain the status quo.
And Larry, I'm 100% sure. I am 100% sure that most folks have no appreciation for what you just said in terms of the intellectual capital, because we don't know who Dr. King is, because we rely on the enemy to tell us who he is.
That's right.
There couldn't be none of those guys who were his alleged generals were the intellectuals, were the students of philosophy that he was. Was the student of world movements that he was. And we just don't, and we don't really understand. We don't really understand the organizations that made up, the so-called Big Six. We don't know. I mean, so we keep, it's just very simple things. Like we believe that Dr. King interjected nonviolence into this movement. That is not true. And so we don't understand. We don't understand what CORE did. We don't understand what SNCC did. We don't really understand what Dr. King did or what SCLC did. We don't understand what NAACP did. We don't understand what the Urban League did. We don't understand any of that. And we don't understand that at the height of this thing, it was, at the leadership level, it was buoyed by strategists and intellectuals. We don't understand that.
Charles Hamilton Houston.
We don't understand that.
We don't know any of these guys, man. And
we don't understand that. We don't understand that it was Pauli Murray came up with the strategy that we leveraged the 14th in order to fight these battles. She wrote that in Spotwood's class, and then he took that and gave that to the Supreme Court, the would-be Supreme Court judge, Thurgood Marshall. Yes. So this wasn't Thurgood's strategy. This was Pauli Murray, the law student's strategy. This was an assignment that she submitted that turned into the linchpin that swung that. And so we don't understand all of these very integral parts about the intellectual power that has to go into our movement.
But we do not, at this point, I talked about this, actually, I didn't talk about it. Dr. Bonner talked about this in Bible study on Tuesday. we do not bring our full intellect into most anything anymore. We just don't do it. He talked about an occasion when where a white minister told him, or asked him about, what theology school he went to. He said, "No, I didn't go to theology school. I have a clinical psychology PhD from the University of Illinois at Urbana." And the white minister told him, "Well, I thought you was just like one of those other Negroes that get up there and hoop and holler," before he left the meeting. And it's not just that, but the applications of it. We don't even know the Bible. We read the Bible back and forth, and we don't know the context in it. We don't know the language nuances. We need to start with Carter G. Woodson, man, and build up, because we just have been so miseducated and we have been so gullible towards it that we are upside down now, man. We're doing this to ourselves.
Larry, we need to start from the proposition that we are an oppressed, colonized people.
Yes.
And then you build a strategy out from there.
But like Harriet Tubman said, I'd have saved a million more if they would have known that they were slaves.
If they had known they were slaves, right?
Listen, fellas.
We don't. We do not act as if we are oppressed. And right. that. So when you mention that football player that co-signed that racist defensive coordinator that was a louse as a player, that's what you're talking about. He has no idea. He thinks he's rich.
Right.
And that's what I meant by asking the question, does he really know? But he probably does on some level.
He has no idea.
But I thought that's what I meant. Intellectually, I should have used the word, does he grasp what the hell he said and what it all was about?
Does he grasp?
Does he grasp it? So, listen, brothers, I'm going to have to get moving. This was a great show. I appreciate your time and energy, brother. And I hope to see you all right back here next week. Viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us again here on The Level Set. We're here every week. Stay with us.
And you can find us on Facebook Live and on YouTube at The Level Set. You all have a great week.
You brothers take it easy.
All right now.